Hello and welcome to Future Back Drinking, a new podcast series from PepsiCo and Time. I'm your host, Dr. Athina Kanioura. As PepsiCo's Chief Strategy and Transformation Officer, I believe it's incredibly important to have conversations with today's industry pioneers about the technologies, innovations, and ideas that are certain to impact all of us. Future Back Drinking is not just a podcast. It's a journey through the now into the next, always served with a twist. In this episode, I sat down for a virtual coffee with my good friend Panos Madamopoulos. Panos is currently serving as the first managing director of partnerships at the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence. He oversees a vast portfolio of industry initiatives and accelerates the AI journey of companies through human-centric strategies. He is also a co-founder of Regeneration, the largest education and employment impact program for young graduates in Greece, with a vision to democratize access to education and opportunity. We'd like to kick things off with a quick cheers, so here's to a great conversation.
Here's to a great conversation. I made sure I was very intentional with my cup. Just there are no misunderstandings about countries of origins in this room.
So Panos, explain to me the coffee mug and to our audience.
Yeah, for the ones that haven't spent time in New York or Chicago, I think that was like the canonical design for mugs or plastic coffee cups for the first generation of Greek diners. So I found it very fitting for a conversation with another Greek today to cover this.
This is gonna be a funny podcast.
Yes.
For the audience, Panos and I have been friends and I would say colleagues through the partnership now for several years. PepsiCo being one of the first industry players working with the Institute. But, you know, Panos really pioneering kind of this space by melting and blending industry with academia and research. So how did you enter this space and what has been always the vision when it comes to the Institute in Stanford and beyond, especially as you brought the top industry players to be associated with the partnership?
Thanks, Athina. Excited to be here. And it's not only the fact we've been friends and colleagues, but even before we're friends, I was looking up to you and the amazing work you've been pioneering across different companies in the industry. Like you mentioned, indeed, I have been in the business of building bridges. And what we've been doing on Stanford AI on the industry side is like building bridges between cutting edge research that's happening across our labs and work that's happening across our startups and then and big enterprise. And the idea is being the Institute for Human-Centered AI, and we make sure that companies operationalize these amazing technologies safely and intentionally, while at the same time they are in this race of building competitive advantage.
So, Panos, as part of your role, you obviously spend a lot of time with the students, with the researchers, a lot of the professors in Stanford. How do you see students engaging in those initiatives? How do they approach research, innovation, and then how do they prepare for what they have been studying?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. And obviously, you know, that is a very fastly evolving landscape, I would say. I tend to think of it as a Venn diagram. And on the one hand, you have the world of research and academia, including all the researchers, the students. And on the other hand, you have, you know, the industry participants. And whereas there was canonically some sort of overlap even before AI, since I think 2019, late 2018, AI was really this big accelerating force that brought those two ecosystems way closer than they used to be. In terms of how students and researchers typically engage and how we can optimize, in a sense, that journey, a few observations, always with a caveat that, you know, different ecosystems, different universities, different parts of the world, they would have some unique characteristics. But on our end, active, hands-on research experiences, we've seen that they are super essential because they give students that sense of direct impact of their work. in particular, the last couple of years across CS and engineering, we see more and more courses that are now offering this kind of opportunity to engage directly with research initiatives as part of the curriculum, many times as part of the mandatory curriculum. Second, which I'm obviously biased, and you have a lot of experience as well, both where you're academic hat on, but also in the industry side, is that we see that proliferation of industry and academic and research partnerships. And the two of us, like PepsiCo and Stanford, we work on some of those. I think that is a platform that has aligned incentives in those two worlds really well, because on the one hand, you have students that they get access to real world use cases, data, at times compute, collaboration with top industry teams like you guys at PepsiCo. And on the other side, industry participants, they get access to this sort of like intellectual alpha. They become smarter. So that has been also something that we've been ridiculously excited about, and we see a lot of momentum. I think underlying this is also a new trend in particular technical universities. And last, something that is very close to my heart, I think, again, since 2018, in particular at Stanford, we saw like the number of researchers and students, in particular the ones with technical backgrounds, deciding to spin off ideas and build startups or experiment.
So Panos, that's a very great point, and let me follow up a bit on this one. So as you said, now kind of the startup ecosystem, which has always been very vibrant in the Bay Area, has exploded. Do you see, though, kind of shortening cycles in terms of those startups becoming, more of a unicorn? Because what we have seen in the past 18 months, every startup that has gone to the AI space is extremely well funded, huge valuations, huge potential. So, which wasn't the case in the past necessarily. I mean, 9 out of 10 startups were failing, didn't get the right level of funding, the right level of attention, they were lingering. Doesn't seem to be the case with AI, especially with Gen AI. So what do you see in this space, and how do you see that morphing in the next probably 1 to 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the most commonly discussed questions on campus and beyond. There are a lot of smart people sitting on both sides of this argument. Like, what is the future you need to believe to justify, the current valuations of those startups, and at what extent this is driven by hype and FOMO, or if there is something really something there, and we might see the next 20 or 30 Googles and Amazon spinning off in the next few years. I think there are things we know and things we don't know. What we know for a fact is that, yes, indeed, the vast majority of our smartest people, they are building. So that's like, we have hard facts. I think sabbaticals across major academic institution is all-time high level. And then if you even look within the existing research labs and the projects that they are incubating, those are clearly relevant and transferable on the enterprise side. So there's absolutely something there. At what extent it's going to be sustainable, I tend to separate, all valuation related discussions with the actual technology and the actual product, because those two might very well go to opposite directions, but they might be synchronized. So you never know. But alpha is happening, and that's not just at Stanford. There is the expectation that, as costs drop, and we've seen like the cost of like models, infra costs drop, barriers to entry to those use cases drop. Like you see this, mass democratization of access to tooling. That will be sort of the tide that will lift our boats, and then both on the consumer and on the enterprise side, you're going to have a bunch of you massive companies capturing market share. The other side of the argument says that AI is a very compounding force, and most of the alpha will be captured by incumbents that they already have those, competitive advantages in terms of scale and people and resourcing, which is frankly what has been happening as of today. So on the technology side, we're extremely bullish.
Wonderful. Of course, as part of your role, and I would like to congratulate you on the 5th anniversary of Stanford HAI.
Thank you. Great having you.
Great achievement. You have been testing some of those ideas, as you said, kind of what sits in the paper or academically with big industry players, whether it's PepsiCo or some others. So it's good to discuss a bit some of the use cases.
In terms of use cases, we have these conversations with industry participants very often. In my mind, I think of it as technical breakthroughs, but also the human breakthroughs that can come out of those collaborations. And I'm very bullish on the magic that can be generated by bringing those two together. And as a matter of fact, the whole program we designed with this intent of bringing those two together and create this fusion where you maximize outputs for both worlds within organizations, both like the technical organization, but of course, executive leadership and management, and then the researcher community on the other side as well. So on the human breakthrough side, we work a lot with companies. You have the more AI native ones, the ones that they are more advanced in their journey, and they have massive AI organizations and tons of resources. And then you have others, typically from the traditional industries, that they are becoming more AI enabled and they are building this almost AI muscle. So that the notion of human breakthroughs comes from a corporate strategy perspective, from a talent perspective, from a workflow lead design perspective, thought leadership, ecosystem, so forth and so on. So this is so increasingly critical, and I think underhyped in certain ways, like the human element in organizations and how this can by itself be a pathway to alpha. And then, of course, on the technical side, we have a number of projects, some of, I think, for the purposes of this conversation, and maybe it makes sense to bring up Helm, the evaluation framework for language models. The team came together and they built that. At the time, was like over 30 language models, and they evaluate them across a number of metrics: accuracy, bias, toxicity, fairness, a bunch of scenarios. And why this is so critical and very connected to what we are trying to do as an organization is because it provides transparency in those evaluations. And in a world that is moving so quickly, you give this tool of transparency to developers and to industry participants, then they can make informed decisions as they are cherry picking on models, and then also hedge against the possible risks of deployment. The fact that we are a university, we are an unbiased organization, I think gives another seal of approval to this effort. And I think by now we have more than 15 of our members and companies in our ecosystem that they have contributed one way or another to this. It has become, I think, a one-stop shop eval framework, in particular in the open source community for developers.
So Panos, as you are thinking about human-centered AI and what does it mean for organizations, how did you help your industry partners to embrace the approach, to take that in and operationalize within kind of the broader activities that they are doing?
First of all, thank you, Athina, for being an ambassador since the very early days of the human-centered approach, because a lot of people used to talk about AI this, AI that, in particular after it became trending. But I think it was only the last few months that folks really has been more intentional about the human-centered elements of AI development and deployment. For us, I mean, that was the reason why Feifei and James and Jordan Temendi built the Institute at the first place, in anticipation of what we are experiencing now, like in anticipation of the developments that the industry is currently dealing with. So our approach to human-centered AI is by and large grounded in those three guiding principles that ensure or at least we want to believe that they ensure that our focus remains on AI that genuinely benefits humanity. First, we recognize that human brain remains the most sophisticated device in the known universe, and we should strive to learn all we can from its nature. Second, we know that this technology is too potent to consider its effects after the fact. So that compels us to explore its ethical implications before, during, and after its development. So throughout the cycle. And finally, we trust that AI should be used to augment, not replace human capabilities. So with those three guiding principle in mind, we build our industry programs, and the industry programs, large-scale R&D, and then what we call like applied intelligence, like the work we do with executives like you on unlocking the human advantages. So for each one of those three principles I mentioned, like we have a number of projects underway and tools that we operationalize this across our programming in terms of human brain and how inspiring it should be, and neuroscience. I'm sure you're following all the conversation around energy efficiency now and how there's this race from, in particular, hyperscalers doubling down on nuclear and trying very hard to unlock like the next frontiers in energy efficiency. Well, guess what? The most energy efficient tool in the universe is the human brain. So there are a number of projects we have with folks over at neuroscience on this, on second and third order effects, and how mindful we should be about implications across the life cycle. We do work with a number of faculty, like cross-disciplinary faculty, on safety, both on how you build models and you evaluate and you assess, but also how you deploy in a way that shields you as much as possible from unintended consequences. Again, every company has a different definition of success. For us, what's really, really critical is pushing the envelope in terms of science. So by bringing those two worlds together, having access to data sets, compute, some of the smartest people out there, global reach, we can really fuel the new pipeline of projects, whether it's on the fundamentals research side or on the applied side, and at the same time, in doing so, help those organizations, companies like PepsiCo, become smarter, build competitive advantage, and move in a more timely, efficient way to their transformation journeys.
But I'm sure there were challenges along the way as companies were trying to embrace AI, and you have been guiding them to, again, the next step. Can you highlight a couple of those?
Yeah, I think in particular, the first couple of years, 50% of my day, if not more, would be dealing with those challenges. So a lot of the gray hair you see, it's because of this. Again, I think there are different colors of challenges depending on the nature of the organizations. But I think there are some common threads that run through both. I think top of mind would be, even to this day, balancing short-term with long-term objectives. Things are moving on the research side and on the tooling side very, very, very quickly. I don't think that organizations, even the ones that have been very agile traditionally, are built to respond at the pace that this technology is moving forward. And then how you measure, it's another whole different ballgame, like how you measure impact, how you measure success in this evolving environment. So balancing short-term with long-term, in particular when it comes to the human-centered aspects of it. Another one which is actually related to this is the gap in understanding between the hardcore technical teams and then the actual decision makers on the business side. Pepsi has been privileged to have you, and you brought those organizations together. So you optimized that journey in a very smart way, but not every organization is built like this. And that gap has second and third order effects. In particular, when you talk about the overall strategy, like vendors, prioritization, and it can become this like death spiral of bureaucracy, or I call like the death by 1,000 pilots. So those are like some top of mind things in terms of like, if there is one of the most common questions I would get from CIOs is like, well, what's the medicine for this? Like how we fix it? And again, I don't think there's a blanket approach, but we have seen some strategies that they work. And again, I think PepsiCo is it's an example of like certain strategies that really work, and top-down commitment is essential.
Okay, now it's time for our lightning round. At the end of each episode, we ask a few quick-hitting questions to give our listeners the chance to get to know our guests on a more personal level. Are you ready?
I was born ready.
Okay, let's see about that.
Yes,
okay,
yes.
test for you. Okay, if you could teach a class on any tech-related topic, what would it be?
Probably I would focus on a program targeting family offices and boards. These groups, while they hold asymmetrical decision-making authority and this ability to drive impactful change in a way very few others can, at the same time, they lack both the time and tailored education to keep up with all those rapid developments in AI. So I think designing a program or programs for those two demographics, again, thinking about how we can accelerate human-centeredness, probably, in my mind, would come with the highest alpha.
Okay, tough one. This one is tough. What's a hot take you have about the future of tech that most people might not agree with?
Yeah, I mean, my hot take, and I'm not sure how hot it is we touched upon it earlier, is that in particular in our world in the Bay Area, a lot of people spend all that time obsessing over the next technical edge or secret sauce in that model or the other model. For me, the real competitive advantage for most organizations, whether you are large corporate or you are startups, will come from humans. And yes, while cutting edge R&D might indeed be foundational for a select number of companies, for the majority of firms out there, alpha will come from how integrate, how they train, how they empower people, and at the end of the day, like how you train yourself to think more AI native. It's not going to come from the actual tooling.
Great. Okay, next. Is there anything you learned from your academic background that you apply to your work on a daily basis?
I have a very interesting contrarian academic background, as you might know. My key takeaway after all those years, having lived in 14 countries, worked with different things, is while education is very valuable and your major or your master is very valuable, it absolutely does not define you. I think what's way more critical, especially in an industry like AI, is the ability to learn quickly. Our friend Reid Hoffman, calls this the infinite learning curve. So I was trained originally as a lawyer. I did startups. I transitioned across multiple industries and did business school. Now I'm doing AI. I think the one constant is the ability to adapt, learn fast, and work very hard. And that agility, I think it's going to become even more critical in this sort of AI empowered age, that even the definition of things and the definition of disciplines is changing, and the ability to sort of learn quickly and retrain yourself would be the most critical.
Wonderful. One more, Panos, for you. It wouldn't be a future back drinking without this question. So let's say, who would you grab a drink with and why?
Yes, I have an idea. I've been a major student of Thucydides, which was I think the modern father of history. And I think it would be extremely fascinating. Thucydides, for people who might not have followed his work, he really studied the conflict of nations, and in particular, the Athenians and the Spartans. And it was two major forces, as they scale, it's inevitable they're going to get into trouble. I think it would be extremely interesting to pick his brains on how he sees this geopolitical competition on AI and what the defenses for this would be. I think, yeah, that would be my pick. Yes.
I didn't expect that. Okay, my friend, thank you for joining me today. Always a joy to talk to you. And I hope to see you again very soon. Cheers, huh?
Thanks for the opportunity to be in your company. Congratulations on the pod. Look forward to continuing our dialogue.
Thanks for joining us on Future Back Drinking. We want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in, sharing, and supporting the podcast. We'll be taking a short mid-season break for the holiday season, but it's a great time to catch up on some of our past episodes, featuring visionaries like Julie Sweet, Deb Kapp, Kasi Kozyrkov, and Arvind Krishna. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow along on all your favorite podcast platforms so you'll be the first to know when we're back. Wishing you all happy holidays, and we'll see you in the new year.
Thank you for joining us on Future Back Drinking. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and stay connected with us on all your favorite podcast platforms.